Hi, Chris.
Hi, Christina.
How
How
are
are
you?
you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing pretty well. Doing pretty well. It's been
Good
a
to see
fun
you.
week. Mhm.
Yeah, it has. So this week, I channeled what we're supposed to talk about, and that jumps right into it. It's been quite a week because we are post election now. We did a pre election and now we're post election. And I think everyone up around me has something to contribute. So I think this will be a very interesting one, but I hope that it's also healing because a lot of the things that I have grown to understand have helped me sort a lot of things out for myself. And I
Hmm.
hope that is the same for you, Chris, and everyone out there watching or listening.
We're listening.
Or listening. So I'm going to start the party off if you don't mind. I'm just going to get right to it.
Please do.
This was an emotional election, first of all. Very emotional on both sides because, I mean, there were some other people being voted for the president of the United States, but mainly there were two candidates. There were Biden and Trump, right?
Right.
So it kind of didn't matter who was going to win. There, with the things that are happening now, there was going to be a clear winner and a clear loser at the end of it, and that is what has occurred. So the emotions continue to run high during this time because we have winners and losers. I should I reveal who I voted for?
You don't have to do anything you're not comfortable with.
The reason why I don't want to is not because I'm ashamed or I'm scared. It's because I feel like right now I'm maybe doing my part by trying to just be kind of without that kind of identity. Do you know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
I'm going to try to do it that way because I feel, but the things that I have to say might reveal me. So maybe I should just go ahead and say that
Are you just buying your time?
yeah, because there's no way to tell the story of what I experienced and help people heal, okay,
Mm.
without saying it. So I will tell you that uh, I was for Biden, but really I was very, very anti-Trump. Now, I understand that there are a lot of people that really like Trump. We're going to get to that. The reason I guess I have to reveal it is because I experienced an all-time record anxiety for the election. It was unexpected, really, the level and the degree in which I experienced this. And I'm going to get your experience in a minute. For me, on election day, it was going towards Trump, and I was pretty convinced that I had the expectation that Trump would miserably lose, and it wasn't occurring at all. So on the actual election day, it actually looked like it was going to end up in his favor at some parts. But on another part, it was also, to me, very disheartening to see that he had so much of a chance, that so many people had been voting for him. And deep down, I did not want that to occur, and I didn't really expect it to occur. So I, at one point, got very overwhelmed and I just had to shut it off. And I'm like, you know what? It's not going to change in the morning, whatever's going to happen. I'm just going to have to sit here and sit in my rage and understand that this is out of my control. I did my part, I did my vote, right? But I have to sit here and just be. I can feel rage, that's fine. But what I can't do is hate. I'm just going to wait to see what happens, but I'm not going to lash out at people. I'm not going to use my emotion as an excuse to take my frustration and my anger out on anyone. The popular online platform for that right now for me is Facebook. I don't do that. I try not to do that. And it was really hard to look at Facebook because there were other people on both sides very invested, and things weren't going the way they thought they were either. And I'm trying to be objective about it because there are so many people with different opinions than me. I completely understand that, and I respect that. Woke up the next morning, it looked like things had turned a bit. Long story short, throughout the week, it got better and better in Biden's favor. And by Saturday morning, they had called it. And outside around me, I live in a very liberal area, Long Beach, California. People were just honking and dancing in the streets, and in joyful celebration about it, just in passing. People would scream and woo and all that. And of course, I felt great because what I wanted to happen happened. Now, with that said, it's very interesting what has happened afterwards with particularly, I feel like there are different categories of Trump. There are the people who vote Republican always, that just don't want to vote for a Democrat. There are the shy Trumpers who don't shout from the rooftops and wave the flags that they are for Trump and they vote for him. And then there are the Trumpers that you typically hear in the news. The hardcore ones, the flag waving, hat wearing MAGA people. And they are all very disappointed because they didn't get what they wanted. And I think it's important to understand what we experience on Earth, what we experience as humans, is going into a processor of sorts of your own internal filter, experience, and circumstances that kind of program the outcome of why you think the way that you do. And I feel like as humans, we need to understand that, because that's what happens at the end of the day. Now, I am very well aware that the reason the emotions run high is because the candidates arguably stand for things that you feel is completely against you, the way you live, your family, or whatever. But we do have to take it down a notch and understand that we cannot move forward, any of us, without, dare I say, be united. And at least we can understand that we are all human and that we can accept when things don't go our way. And I didn't get that circumstance in this particular situation, but I already had it in my mind that I had to accept it. I really did. And it was going to stink because I didn't want to do that, but it was something that had to be done. And also what is happening now with people who did vote red. So with that said, with that just small message in there that I got, I'm going to ask you, Chris, how did you experience everything, and what kind of wisdom might your people above offer you, offer us today?
Well, before I share my experience, my question for you is, the Monday before the election, right? So not the day that, that everything was on TV. How did you feel then relative to how you feel today? It's been 8 days.
Mm-hmm. Well, remember, the roller coaster ride started the next day, but the Monday before, I really didn't know who was going to win for sure. I don't get any kind of prophecy. I don't try, because I feel like that ruins the experience of life. So I'm not that kind of person. I didn't ask who was going to win or anything like that. I was not interested in that because I want to experience how it unfolds. I actually really deep down didn't know, but I was hoping that it would not be Trump, whatever it was going to be, which was going to be Biden, right? I was not a huge fan of him, but I felt that for this country to have a better chance at success, we needed to get him out. Again, just my opinion. So I was hopeful, but maybe on Tuesday morning, everything changed. And I got a little bit like giddy, like Christmas morning giddy, where you're waiting for like to open the presents.
Right.
You're
Right.
waiting
It's
all
election day.
day. You're
Yeah.
waiting all day. And then, you get to open the first present and you're like, ooh, things are coming in. And I think deep down, I really did have an expectation that I was going to get that big pony that dad promised.
Mm-hmm.
But instead, it was just a lot of little trinkets coming in here and there and of action figures that I wasn't really interested in. I was like, how does this relate to the pony?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, just things took a turn and I realized that I had expectations. I really expected that it was going to be a bigger win than it was, or let's say loss. Today,
Yeah.
I feel much better because I don't have election anxiety or election anticipation anymore. It's done for now, we'll say. We don't know what's going to happen. I mean, the results are in, but with all of the uncertainty of the backlash of the results, we'll see what happens. But today I feel hopeful and I feel relieved and I feel, I thought that I was going to be smug and like woohoo about it, but I'm not. I just feel that we've taken a little shift in the right direction, and I'm curious to see what's going to happen with the potential that we now have, the potential energy. Are we going to create or transfer it into kinetic energy the way that needs to be done for us as a country to move forward? Now the work begins. That's where I am today.
And now the work begins. I had what is it? Today's Tuesday, so this was basically it was a week ago today, and I remember because we didn't do a podcast, right, specifically so we could watch and have our own experiences with it. And I remember thinking while this was going on, like, there's not a clear mandate one way or the other. and it didn't change before going to bed. So that Tuesday night, that Wednesday night, and that Thursday night, my sleep was really choppy. Tossing and turning, not restful. And it wasn't, I didn't have a lot of anxiety about Biden winning or Trump winning. And I voted for Biden, but my vote was really for Kamala Harris because I want to see a black mom in office. I mean, I was like,
there you go.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I remembered waking up one of those nights and thinking, oh, there's no shortage of work to do. And this middle that exists, right, where there's this 71 million over here and 75 million over here, is what's the common ground? Because this two-party system just flat out doesn't work. And it reminds me a lot of being a parent to a early stage teenager. So you haven't met Hudson in person, but he's 13 with all the feels. Like he has like a chin hair and the mustache and the voice changing and the wild mood swings. And I remember thinking about that quite a bit actually on Sunday, but I'll get back to the point. So with the election being over, we both know that the hard work is underway, and yet it has been for some time. And are we playing Patty cake high fives.
No, no. I just realized the camera's out of focus. Sorry. I was trying to make it focus stealthily, but there's nothing stealthy about that. Now, is there?
So for those of you who are just listening, Christina was like high fiving the camera, and I was just playing. So, but to me, it just felt like a moody teenager. So when a democracy looks like it's floundering, right? It may or may not be. I mean, I'm grateful for the democracy that we have. And I'm also grateful for the opportunity to make it a better government going forward. But there are changes underfoot. And what we are seeing now with just this two-party system, it's not working, and it's not going to get better. There's not going to be a shift like where everyone on the right says, oh, you're right. Yes, free healthcare for everyone, Green New Deal. Like, yep, we see the light. That's how it is. Nor is everyone on the left going to say, you're right, it's misinformation. We believe in less government and to help the systems. Right? That's not going to happen either. So it looks like, or at least it could feel like, and you can make an argument that we're at an impasse. Now, this is my third son, right? So I've gone through this with Holden, I've gone through this with Zachary. And when I compare the age of our democracy to that of a human, it could be, this is like our early teenager stage in a grand sense. So we have this mercurial behavior. We have weird chin hairs sticking out. We could be like super happy when we wake up one morning, and then we could be grumpy the next, right? It's nonsensical, but you know that things are changing and things are evolving. So for the sake of this conversation, let's just assume that this child is going to live a long, healthy life and get to 85 plus and maintain all of their faculties. So one of the things when I was struggling, so many years ago, that my mother would tell me is that she did the best that she could, and she did the best that she knew how. And I don't doubt that at all. Now, while I felt at the time that her micromanaging and sheltering and helicopter parenting was overbearing, I did know at the time, and I recognize even more so, that she meant well and it came from love. So for comparison's sake, we can assume that the founders, the folks who wrote the Constitution, operated in the same way. So perhaps noble in thought, but weak in execution. We can't excuse inequality and slavery, but no perfect parents, no perfect founders, no perfect democracy.
Agreed.
So my son, who's 13, is as moody as the night is long. And there are moments where I'm like, oh, this little motherfucker. And Meredith, like some other time, would be like, oh, this little motherfucker. We're not sure which version of him we're going to get in the morning. So there's the quick to react, assuming the worst, don't remind me to take a shower kid, or the one who gives us hugs and cuddles with the dogs before making his breakfast. What I do know is that he's evolving physically, mentally, and emotionally, while trying to figure out his lot in life, who he is, new ways of operating, and he tries them out in a safe place with his mom and I, particularly in this pandemic world, right? It's us and the dogs. So it's difficult for me to imagine him out in the world in 5 years, driving a car, going to school or college or university or whatever he does, where he is today, to being completely self-sufficient, but that's on me. And it's much the same in imagining, like, where are we now, where we're at this impasse where, I mean, Trump's already working on his plan for a second term right now, or whatever's going on. It's hard to watch. I also know that it's our responsibility, regardless, to help him shape his ethics, to give him the tools to self-govern, while caring and nourishing his body, his mind, and his soul, even though he won't acknowledge the soul. So it's been incredibly difficult for us as parents watching him in 2020. It's been incredibly difficult watching what's happening to our democracy as well. Him not wanting to interact with kids his own age in real life. His grades are meh compared to the usual output. He's bored. He's in front of and interacting with multiple devices, to include hours of Xbox time where he can interact with his friends from Chicago and Santa Monica and Myanmar and wherever else in the world these people come into these servers. But as I write and think about this, perhaps he's adopted and adapted to this new normal much faster than his mother and I. For all we know, he could be the zeitgeist of his generation. And it's our perception and it's our way of operating and it's our preconditioning that we're trying to put on him, even though it's 35 years later and what worked for us is a radically different world than what's going to work for him. Right. Mm-hmm. An example of that would be this model of, hey, kitty cat, this model of the 4-year degree, which is dated. So I think over the weekend, there was an article that came out about Google, who's offering 300 hours of training. You pass the training, they treat that like a 4-year degree, and you get a job, a base salary of like $93,000 a year. So
at Google?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
So Google's doing it. Microsoft is doing it. Tata Consulting Services. It's getting away from this dated way of educating where you accumulate tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of debt, and then you try and pay it back by way of government loans or grants or scholarships, whatever. So, but Google's offering 300 hours in exchange for a $93,000 a year salary. Microsoft and Tata Consulting Services are taking a similar approach. There was an article that Thomas Friedman put in the New York Times, which is another indicator of how I typically vote around this new economy. So that's helped me shift how I evaluate, how he's learning and what works for him. And then backing out of this, right? So maybe he's onto something, and Meredith and I need to rethink what a successful education looks like. But to expect for him to be a happy, healthy, and whole human without our support is naive. The same can be said for our democracy, and this much is certain. Evolution always was and always will be. So, regardless of how the US election turned out for you, clearly we're going through puberty. Yeah. Our complexion is blotchy, the voice is changing, the hair is growing out of weird places. We're not quite sure what to do with our private parts. Our behavior is completely irrational and irreconcilable at moments while we're singing Kumbaya at others. We are in an evolutionary democracy, one that's evolving from win, lose, us versus them, red versus blue, what you stand for and what you revile. Biden and Harris won this election by 5%.
Yeah.
And the Republican Party maintains control over the Senate. So guess what? And this is, things I was like making note of on Sunday, and it's just this chasm has become more defined. There will be obstructionists and no real change in favor of any one party is going to transpire. It's going to be more of the same. So while this may be frustrating, assuming that this frustration continues to deconstruct our current democracy and tilt towards autocracy, there will be a revolution. And let's take that word apart. So a re-evolution rather than devolution. It will be more of the same, more separateness, unless we find commonality between both, which will largely marginalize the edges and redefine this majority. Guess what it's not going to be? It ain't going to be older white men, right? We are no longer the face of this country. And what you have, someone wrote that it's like envisioning turtle Trump just turned over on his back and flailing, right? Because he can't get upright. It's the same thing for old white men. I say old white men, but older white men who still perceive and or feel, whether it's intentional or unintentional, that this exists because of us and for us. So, after thinking about this, I don't really see this as a bad thing. Is in our two-party system, while not written into the Constitution, it is designed to fail. Why? Well, because we're all humans that are connected to each other, whether we like it or not. While we are diverse in our sexuality and ethnicity, our basic needs, identification, our basic needs are all the same. There's safety, connection, and self-esteem and security. Once we meet those, and it's just Maslow, right? So it's kind of the triangle and just widely accepted, or at least it's been in every like psychology 101 class. But after those are met, we begin to drive toward growth, exploration, love, purpose, and ultimately, the cards line up, transcendence. And transcendence is not a woo-woo term. Transcendence just means to go beyond what previously existed for you. And this is our common ground, the drive towards growth, exploration, love, purpose, and going beyond our current experience. We share this one planet with aspirations to explore outwardly. I think that other stationary entities would even make themselves available to us once we begin to operate in a connected manner, right? So other people may want to date us once we actually kind of get through this puberty. I just don't see it as a failure. What I see and feel and experience and how I'm sleeping better is that it's a launching point toward a better future, one that supports our path toward transcendence, toward going beyond what existed for us that Monday or the last week of February in 2020, or whatever we perceive to be going back to normal. We can use the framework that the founders provided and improve upon that. I can't imagine, given the rate of change in our world, just using Moore's law, that if we were to write a constitution today, that we would perceive it to be a finite template or a finite resource. I would like to think that it would be written as an operating manual, which allows for upgrades and add-ons, a framework that provides a code of ethics which supports the greater good, recognizing that what's in my neighbor's best interest is also in my best interest. If the underserved kid in my community is provided with a path to go beyond that which was previously being made available to them, it stands to reason that she would be less inclined to support herself via illicit means, because there are opportunities being made available. If she then or he has a chance to become whole, then my community will benefit from more wholeness and connectedness. There's one thing that behooves us, and that is the responsibility for ourselves. Instead of imposing ourselves on others or the opposite party or the world by our intention to unite everything, to get everyone to believe what we believe and see things the way that we see them, it just makes a lot more sense. It's more coherent to live with this wholesomeness inside of ourselves. Our suffering as a species, as a country, as a Democrat, as a Republican, as an independent, is due to this illusion of separation, which generates like cravings or longings and feelings of abandonment. I want to be part of something that's bigger than them, because they're just placed, they know that there's something more and they don't know what to attach it to. So you might attach it to an ideology. These experiences of connectedness can cure the pain of separateness or separation. It's labeling, right? So when you try this out, like I could say, I'm not a Republican, I'm not a Democrat. Well, then who are you? These labels that we create have to make sense of and or to bring order to our world, but there's no such thing as a Republican. You can't just talk to Republican and have a conversation. It's a construct. It's a term. It's nomenclature that we put on something to be able to identify it. Without us labeling it, it does not exist. So who am I really? What are my basic needs? What do I want to create? What do I need to create it? What do you want to share freely with the world? Utilizing what's available to us today in front of us. This I've got like 3 computers and a phone sitting in front of me, but this democratization of information where we can match people and ideas and projects with resources. We have this social structure in place, Christina, which leans toward collaboration and co-creation. So this separateness, this illusion of separateness, while it may not seem like it, it's failing everywhere naturally because people have access to this. Not everyone, but most people have access to a device and information. And because it's failing everywhere naturally, it goes against the universal law of evolution. When enough of us come together, intuitively, experientially, we can connect with each other and with this living system. We have the resources to make this world whole without taking anything away from anyone. So it's the common ground. And as I'm saying this, I'm feeling better about just the news and today, because the rest of it's just, it's death, it's dying, it's decay, it's archaic ways of operating and thinking, but it's leading towards a better shared future because evolution occurs naturally. It always was and always is, always will be.
I really hope you're right. I really do. I mean, what you say definitely speaks to my heart, and it does make me feel better. Now, I have a lot of things to say. The first one is perhaps, and I completely, I'm with you right there. But I think it would be easy for anyone listening to say, of course you feel like this because your candidate won, Christina and Chris. So, I mean, because it's just so emotional, you know?
Yeah. I just don't feel like my candidates won. What I wanted was utopia. What I got was what was destined to happen, which is more of the same.
Yeah. I agree. It will be more of the same before anything happens. It makes me very encouraged to hear what you have to say about that, and it helps my experience of this as well because I did have a hard time for a couple of days. But first of all, I'm so glad we didn't do the podcast on election night because I would have been a basket case and I probably would have canceled. And I never cancel. Like it takes a lot for me to cancel something, especially a podcast that I love doing. But yeah, I thank goodness we didn't do that. I mean, the teenager metaphor is perfect. We are in the middle of this angst and we don't know what version we're getting. That's very, right. Very true. And that irrational, like reasoning and feeling attacked and wanting to hide and then wanting to say something, it's just this flip flop. And the metaphor couldn't be any more spot on than it is. So what I really liked about what you said was becoming whole. And you mentioned the love in there. And in my experience with pretty much everything, with all the readings I do, with the coaching and things like that, it always kind of comes back to that. Being whole or becoming whole and love. And I think if anything you can take away from this, it would be that. Let's focus on becoming whole and loving. And I know the knee-jerk reaction of the teenager might be, for any side, just like, well, we got a lot of work to do, or well, right. they're going to do this, now taxes are going to do this, or this is going to happen. It's easy to do that, but think about how that makes you feel. you can't always be so belligerent, in my opinion. And you might beg to differ because, you know, people think that change, you said evolution is inevitable, but I don't think people always feel like that. And I feel like they feel as if they have to fight tooth and nail
Yes,
to get
totally.
things accomplished. And to an extent, yeah, I agree. You do need to go through those kinds of things, but on the big scale, really, you're right. Everything is going to happen is going to happen. And think about not so long ago, you know, the 1960s. That was a decade for you. I wasn't there. You weren't there. But I mean, that was quite a decade from what I heard, and conditions have changed since then.
Hmm.
It just, and very rapidly as well. So if you think about it in that way, I mean, this is another period of change that the history books will talk about for a very, very long time, or well, until the end of time, whatever that may be. So you brought up about college, by the way. I have a lot to say about that, but maybe not for this podcast. But I do want to say it is becoming that problem of all the debt versus what's a degree worth
Hmm.
is now becoming a bigger and bigger issue. And people like Gary Vee say you don't need college. And you know, you could just skip right over it. There are a lot of innovative, modern people out there doing insane work on a
Yeah.
grand scale that are like, don't go to college. I mean, my degree opened doors for me. It really did. It I would not have been able to work in South Korea without a degree. So, yay. Has it done much else? I mean, I don't know. I mean, it did accrue some debt. If I had to do it again, I wouldn't have gone to school in the US. I would have gone in Europe. And I don't have an EU passport, but it still would have been a heck of a lot cheaper than in the United States. Just saying.
Yeah, it's funny. So as you're talking, I'm thinking, well, how I don't actually know how old you are, and I'm not going to ask, but I'm 47. My question for you is going to be, how many careers have you had?
By the way, 41.
Amazing.
Are we talking careers or jobs?
I'm talking careers.
Well, one solid one, and I'm going into another one now. So teaching, pretty much it.
Yep.
But within the teaching scope, there's been a lot of things that I've done. I've done all kinds of stuff. But why do you ask?
Well, so Meredith and I had we didn't really debate this. Is her she's a very strong advocate for let's say organized education. I took the road less traveled, and I was like, nah, college, schmolage. I mean, I had more interest in doing the radio show there than anything else. And once I got bored with that, and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna move and move on. Gesundheit.
Sorry, I'm muted. Yeah.
That was going to be a vigorous sneeze. It looked like it was a really healthy one.
That was a loud one.
Yeah, but I think I've run restaurants, bartended, kind of the same. Sold stocks and bonds for Morgan Stanley in New
Oh,
York.
wow.
Was a technical recruiter. Worked in e-commerce as a QA tester. Eventually got into a full-time role in sales, run sales teams all over the place. I mean, so I've changed my career like probably 7 or 8 times. And I'm not saying that I'm the zeitgeist and a model of how this should be done. It was definitely the scenic route. But what's consistent for me is that if something wasn't working, I would blow it up and try something different. Like, okay, tried this, check these boxes, still not happy. Boom, blow it up and go do something different. So the only point that I wanted to make with that was because there certainly are advantages to leaving the house, developing social skills, being away from home, being able to manage your time effectively. I get all that. Those are things that you can't do in front of a computer. But I think there's more when we take a look back at the psychological effects of this time on younger people that for a year haven't really been in school, right? And how this has shaped them. Yeah, of course, there are negative ramifications, but kids are very adaptable. And I'm really interested in what are some of the positive things that are coming out of this as well. And then how does this play out 20 years down the road when this generation's in the workforce? Really interesting to me. The question I want to ask you, because I don't quite have this figured out. Anyone who's listening to this podcast or seeing this podcast, if you're seeing this at some point in 2020, you're likely a believer or you're similarly ascribed to what Christina and I are talking about. But I haven't seen Scott, my neighbor, the MAGA hat guy, since election day. He's nowhere to be found. I hope he's okay.
Yeah, I remember you mentioning him. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm thinking of others, like there was when we went out to dinner on Sunday and we're in like Grover Beach, and there's a pickup truck with a huge Trump flag driving off the back. People were honking, and there was a nice little celebration in downtown San Luis Obispo for the Biden folks. But now what, right? So we can sit here and use some flowery language around connecting to yourself, but what does that actually look like? What are some tangible things that someone can do, knowing that this is just going to be more of the same for the next 4, 8, 12, 16 years? And while we may not, for me, it's about connection, right? And connecting back to source or something that feels whole. So we can talk about connecting to wholeness. So I'm interested in getting I want to get your opinion on this, because I can't hug my friends, right? We can't have everybody over for Thanksgiving like we did last year. It's going to happen through the winter, and hopefully this vaccine comes through. But if not, something else will, right? But either way, it's going to be a longer winter. And I can go hug a tree, right, and listen to it and connect with it, because trees are sentient beings. If you haven't read, what is that, the Life of a Tree, or The Life of Trees and How Trees Communicate, it's a brilliant. It was written by a botanist in Germany. It's a brilliant book. Anyway, so I can go hug a tree. I can watch the hawks fly, or at least look at me when they're flying overhead. Notice how they respond. I can smile at someone from beneath my mask and then see how the wrinkles around their eyes respond, and use nonverbal ways of trying to connect with someone. I can observe and connect in ways that are innate, right? So just part of our nature. I hate daylight savings time. For me, it's just like, this makes no fucking sense. I fucking hate it.
Oh my gosh, rage for me too.
It's the worst thing. Why would you just intentionally fuck up my sleep?
Yeah.
But where I got to that with it this week is like, well, maybe so part of this connecting thing is just leaning back into my circadian rhythm, and rather than the false lights of my screens. I already go to bed early, but maybe I just lean more into waking up earlier and then going to bed at the same early. Just trying to be more in flow with what's going on around me. I can grab a book and sit by the fireplace rather than watching Mr. Robot. I can breathe, I can pause, I can notice, I can observe, I can not react. I can listen, I can smile, I can smell, I can taste, I can chew more slowly. What would you recommend to any of your coaching clients, Christina, in a time like this? Like how do you take all of this and recommend how someone's able to connect?
Yeah, that's a hard one. I mean, I know this is going to sound generic, but understanding yourself, and the best way I find people doing that is journaling. And that has to do with your response to the world around you, but also internalizing who you really are. I mean, even having a conversation with yourself, and I know that sounds kind of ridiculous, but it actually, have you ever had a conversation with yourself?
In the last 15 minutes? I'm that guy walking around the neighborhood.
Yeah, always having a conversation with yourself.
Oh, yeah.
So I am undergoing some intense mental health support outside of what I do. And one of the things that has shocked me, but yet has been such a pleasant surprise, was how I thought I knew myself, but
Mhm.
I don't really know who I really am. I have a pretty good idea, but as I continue my treatment and support with mental health with professionals, I get pleasant surprises all the time. I would like to recommend some sort of outside support. I think everyone can benefit from it. Now, it can be in the form of a coach. Spiritual coach can do that for you, but it can also be psychiatric support, counseling, medical professionals as well. And I am a very spiritual person. In fact, I had to do kind of like an assessment of like my spiritual health, my emotional and physical and things like that. And I was off the charts with spiritual, believe me. I was like, man, I could teach a couple of people because that's what I do. I mean, I'm very connected spiritually, lower scores in other areas. We'll talk about that in a future podcast. But again, it's so wonderful to have support. It is of any kind. And I was one of those people that I felt, oh, because of the things that I do and the way that I help others, I don't need support because I'm the support for others. You know,
Mhm.
that's completely false, absolutely false. And I don't think I'm a very open person. I don't think I'm embarrassed at all to say that I sought out mental health. I think mental health is as important as physical health. If you have pneumonia, you want to seek out somebody who knows about pneumonia.
Mhm.
If you are questioning some things about yourself and your life and how you react to things in life, you need to seek out a professional that knows something about that. And I definitely want to recommend you do that. A big reason I did that was because I actually checked the benefits of my health insurance and saw that there was some mental health benefit. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that. That would be great. I just want to figure some things out for myself. I want to talk to some people that would know what to do to help me or assist me or guide me or whatever I needed. So that's my first thing. Second thing is, oh, well, I already mentioned the journaling and knowing yourself. I think that goes hand in hand with seeking any kind of support from somebody else.
Mhm.
But I think that if you are reluctant to do that, or you don't want to do that, you're stubborn like I was, I'll tell you, you should definitely consider it. I mean, really ask yourself deep down, push all the outside influences away, okay? And try to really, really settle the emotions enough to ask yourself, what is something that you can do for yourself to make you feel a little bit better? And again, I know that sounds so cliche, but that's self-care right there, and that's really important. And it also can lead to other discoveries on your own. I'm trying to give you an example here. For example, well, regarding the election, let's talk directly about that because people are still and they will continue to be very upset about things that are happening politically for the next couple of months at least. And I mean, it's going to move on.
Mhm.
And you're a person that's like, I can't just sit here and do anything. Now, try to separate the emotional side from what's happening outside. Okay. And if you do that, really think about, okay, what is really irking me right now? What is it about this situation that I'm reacting to? And then on kind of the other side of it, you have to think, what can I do to make myself feel better right now, but also feel like I am doing something, if that's something that you're called to do, something that'll help the greater good, not just your party. I'm sorry, but I'm not all about parties either. And I already kind of said I did vote for Biden. I voted for Republicans before. I just want to say that.
Me
I'm
too.
not going to specify who. But I have voted Republican before, and I'm not, and I do lean left, but I feel that this is very like separatist language where, it's like one or the other. And I feel as if you have to think about it as we're all in this together, and you're not always going to win, and you're not always entitled to get your way. But how can you get your way? There's a finesse about it. There are people that, go in storming in, and they want what they want, and that's that. But then there are other people that get what they want, but they didn't have to do any of that. How do they get that accomplished? How do they finesse it? And I know that will probably really irk some people, but that's how I feel. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that. Thanks for sharing.
That was a pretty long-winded answer to your
No,
question.
but what I heard was like connection.
Yeah.
Right. And connecting with others and realizing that you alone aren't able to solve everything.
No, you can't. Yeah.
And it's great to have outside perspective, particularly when you're in service of helping others. Right.
Absolutely.
But you said something which I thought was great. And it's like, so who am I really?
I think we always bring it back to that.
Yeah, it's great. And it's a great question. And there are those of us that are at a certain place and station in life where we can ask that question. And there are others that's just not where they are and may never be, right? That just may not be their dharma or what they're working on this time around. But we can connect, and we can connect in nonverbal ways. And what I can control is my own mental constructs. I can control how I react and how I interact with the world around me. And it doesn't mean I don't get annoyed. It doesn't mean that I don't look at McConnell and just want to shake the shit out of him. But it is growth and it is evolution. You seeking help and outside perspective is you wanting to grow and evolve. And whether we're conscious of that or unconscious to it, it still happens, right? It is evolution. And that's just the rule of the universes, the multiverse is that. So I think when I find myself triggered by individuals that are diametrically opposed to my experience, what I've learned to ask is, well, I'm sure you have a really good reason for feeling that way. Do you mind sharing it with me? And just shut the fuck up. Right? Because there's no changing anyone's mind. But what I can do is try to understand their perspective without trying to convince them of anything. It's like, oh, and I always benefit from getting more context.
Awesome. Well, I think that conversation contributed a lot to my own well-being. So thank you.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure. And I want to encourage anyone listening, if you have something to say, even if it wasn't something that maybe you thought we'd want to hear, please say it. I love it.
What I did think about doing, and maybe we could try this out, is live streaming, us recording these, right? Just raw and unedited. And
that would be great.
That hit me way too close to, filming time today, but I think it'd be interesting to just take this topic because I'm sure it's going to be more of the same next week. And maybe we take a couple of folks that are interested and work through any of these triggers with them.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. I feel like that's the way forward for sure. And again, it's about connection. Well, anyway, Chris, beautiful time, beautiful night, and stay warm. It's pretty chilly here.
It's cold here too. I did not realize how fucking cold it gets in Central Coast. It was like 37 this morning when I took the dogs out. I was like, oh no.
What was that like seeing your breath cold?
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's
Like it was
not.
like there was like the dog like gently putting her paw on the grass and saying, "No thanks, I'm going to go on the sidewalk." Sort of
Oh,
cold.
even your dogs don't even know that. Ooh,
Yeah,
I just
the pit
don't
bull
do
doesn't
winter
really.
well.
No, so and we these nasty wind shears. It's like 40, 50 miles because we're still like just a few clicks away from the ocean, and these winds come barreling down the valley, wham! And one came when got Bailey, the beagle, in the backside when she was in process. And she yelped, she's like, woo! And completely 180 and faced it. And the neighbor was laughing. I'm like, well, she's a Chicago dog, and she has not had that experience in some time, right? She's had this cushy Santa Monica life for a number of years. So,
Oh, it's a very sheltered existence being a Santa Monica dog. So
oh yes,
back to the real world, lady.
yep.